Hi, my name is Mark Drew, and I'm the 301 instructor here at Avant Media Institute. Today we're going to talk about the first things to do when you start your mix. Let's get into it. So the first thing you're going to want to do is take a listen to your mix. Analyze what you're going for. It's important to have pre-production meetings with the artist to have a sound that you want to aim for. Because remember, it's their song, not yours. You may have some liberty with the mix once you develop a relationship, but early on, we want to listen to the artist and make sure we get exactly what they're asking for. Once we establish what we're going for, now it's time to organize our session. I like to label and color code everything just to make it easier for me to look at. So for each section, I like to give them their own color. So I'm going to make the drums is really light purple, the bass, just go a shade darker. And I just kind of just go darker in shades as I go. The instruments will be this color right here. My hook lead will be this dark blue. All the backing tracks for the hooks will be a tad darker. First lead down below. And my verse backing tracks, one color. Now the reason why it's so important to organize your session, you're going to be making a lot of your decisions based in groups sometimes. So you're going to be mixing your drums at once or mixing your vocals at once. And one thing you don't want to do is have everything all over the place and you're hunting and searching. It just takes up more time. You want to try to be as efficient as possible when it comes to mixing. So if you're the engineer, organize everything, label it, and I even number it. The reason why I number it is if I'm sending this off, Pro Tools is going to upload every track in alphabetical order. Now, what comes before the alphabet? Numbers. So kick is going to be number one in my session, but kick starts with a K. Let's say I have a bass in there as well. Well, bass is going to go above kick, and that's not necessarily how I want my session organized, right? Or backing vocal maybe obviously going to go before kick. So what I want to make sure is everything is numbered correctly, so that way it will appear exactly the same way I organize it in my session. Lastly, once I have everything organized, I set up all my aux tracks, and then I'm usually good to go from there. Now let's talk about gain staging, which is a very important part of the process. So a lot of times, producers will send stuff already limited and things are already louder than what they need to be. Quick way to fix that is gain staging. And they're just taking the gain down on each of the tracks that are too loud and bringing them to a volume that is good enough to work with. So I'll take a look at this vocal right here. It's a little louder than I needed to be initially. Let's take a look at it right now.
Look, you ever wonder why nobody make it? We get rejected all the time and over time, can't nobody take it?
And if you look at my aux right here, it's pumping pretty loud. So what I'm going to do right here is I'm going to turn down the gain at a volume that works, where I have a lot more headroom to work with. Let's check it out now.
Look, you ever wonder why nobody make it? We get rejected all the time and over
If you
time,
see
can't
in the-
nobody take it?
And if you see in the aux track right here, it's still a little loud, so we're going to go ahead and turn it even more. Now let's check it out.
Look, you ever wonder why nobody make it? We get rejected all the time and over time, can't nobody take it?
Perfect. Now that's at a level that we can start mixing comfortably. So now we're going to talk about leveling things out a bit. So what we're going to do with this is, with our faders, putting our tracks at a place where before processing, it has a place to sit in the mix. Let's take a look at our drums. So we just take a look at the drums right here. If you look at our drum bus, that's a very, very good place for those to sit. And when we introduce our bass, if we look at our bass, it's at a really, really good level already. But let's take a look at something like our lead melody right here. If we take that down a bit, now before any processing, that sits a lot better in the mix. And you can do that with all the tracks before you add any plugins, so that way you're already having an idea of where things should be sitting in your mix. Now once you've done this with your entire session, now it's time to start focusing on panning. Panning is something I see a lot of young engineers not really utilize enough. everything's always up the middle and it's just cluttered. And sometimes what's wrong with your mix may not be your EQ, it may not be your compression, it may not be any of your effects. It could be everything's just in one spot and it kind of takes up a lot of room. So kind of have a general place for some of your things to hit. So like my kick drum is going to be up the middle. My bass is going to be up the middle. My lead vocals are going to be up the middle, and maybe one snare if I have more than one. Or depending on how many snares I have, some of them would be up the middle, right? But outside of that, everything else will kind of have its place. You have a whole spectrum to use it. So we still haven't added any processing yet. We've talked about leveling things out, we talked about panning. Now let's talk about tonal balance. Now tonal balance requires you to kind of just like, analyze what sounds you have in the mix and what things could be interfering with one another. For instance, if I'm listening to my lead vocal and my bass, and maybe there are some frequencies in the bass that are clashing with my vocal, then we can start to house some of that and dip some of those frequencies to make room for our vocal to shine. It's very important to understand the genre that you're working in. For instance, this is a hip hop track, so my vocals need to sit pretty loud in the mix, right? As compared to a traditional rock song where the guitars are driving the record and the drums more so than the vocal is. So in this one, the vocal needs room to shine. So what I'm going to be doing is listening to a lot of these instruments and making sure none of these frequencies clash with one another. So if we take a look at this electric piano with our vocal, we're going to solo the two.
You ever wonder why nobody make it? We get rejected all the time, and over time, can't nobody take it. This game will test your spirit.
Let's take a look at if we dip some of these frequencies that our vocal will be kind of prominent in.
You ever wonder why nobody make it?
And these are already done in the track, but let's be drastic with it.
You ever wonder why nobody make it? We get rejected all the time, and over time, can't nobody take it. This game will test your spirit just to go and break it. Everybody's not a winner, and it's tough for some to face it.
So once you dip some of these frequencies, you're allowing more space for that vocal to shine. Now I wouldn't do this much, but kind of play with it a bit and see what works for you. Just be sure when you're taking stuff away, be mindful that you are changing the original sound of that instrument now. So as long as you're making space for that vocal to shine, you're doing the right thing. And for all your instruments, it's good to have a general idea of what purpose they serve. So for instance, my bass is going to be occupying the low end, right? So let's think of it like this. If my bass is going to be on the low end, and that's what I'm using it for, any instruments that kind of clash with that I don't need on the low end, let's say if I had a piano that had a lot of low end information, I'm going to house those frequencies to make room for the bass. So when reviewing your session, make those decisions before we move forward and you're good to go. Now let's get into something that's so important, but one of the most tedious parts of the job, and that's tuning. And this is where it's important to have a basic knowledge of music theory, or at least know how to find the scale. Without getting too deep into it right now, we've talked about scales before in the past, and scales are, think of it like this, there's 7 notes in each scale. So with every key of the song, there's 7 notes you're going to have to work with. For instance, C major is all white keys, right? So if we're looking at Melodyne, and let's say the artist is hitting a black key, right? Well, if we know it's in C major, off the rip, we know that black key can be corrected either half step up or down to the nearest white key. So it's as simple as that. Now, this part of the process is one of the more lengthier parts that you're going to have to do, but it makes the biggest difference in your session. So make sure we're tuning our leads, our backing vocals, everything. Because once you do that, everything kind of glues together as a whole. Now you have 2 tools at your disposal for tuning. If a singer is really good and they just need the extra nudge, auto-tune will work with a light setting. Now if somebody needs a little more help, that's when Melodyne could come into place and really shape that vocal. Now once you tune everything, another important task is to vocal line everything. And that's just making sure all your dubs are in line with your lead. Now some artists are really good at stacking vocals and some need a little more help. And for some that need a little more help, vocal line blends together everything and is so pleasing to the ear. Now we talked about pre-production meetings earlier in this video. And why they're so important is to have a sound to aim for. What I like to do with any artist that I work with is have a reference mix of this song. Now, we're not trying to recreate that song, or we're not trying to be copycats, but if there's a song that is similar, that sounds great, and they love that tone, it's good to identify that so you have something to listen to before you start making any decisions with your processing. Once we have something to aim for, you can make all your decisions accordingly. And once all these steps have been checked off and addressed, now it's time to start your mix, and now it's really time to have some fun. Now keep in mind, this is something that I like to do. This is my workflow. What works for you may be a little different, or maybe it's the same, but that's up to you. So these are some things you can take from and maybe add on to your own, because I promise you the stuff that you learn right now, you'll be relearning those as you go, and you'll find new concepts that may work better for what you're doing right now. And for those of you who are beginners, soak up as much information as possible. Keep learning, and most importantly, keep practicing. And if your mixes aren't where you want them to be just yet, don't worry, they will be. Keep doing it. I like to equate everything to sports. If I am really bad at basketball right now, but starting today for 6 months, I put 200 shots up a day. At the end of those 6 months, my jumper will look really nice, and the same will work for your mixes. Keep working, and you'll see improvement day by day. Again, my name is Mark Drew, and I'm a 301 instructor here at Avant Media Institute. If you guys have any other questions, be sure to comment below, and remember, like and subscribe. Thanks for stopping by. Check you guys soon.